Hello and welcome to another episode of History After Hours. This is episode 3. What is it? October the 9th?
October 9th.
2000?
Leif Erikson Day. That's exactly right.
Hey, there you go. 2015. We are brought to you by Spam, the other non-meat. I don't know. I just had Spam for the first time,
What?
literally a month ago.
How? That's
It's
like
delicious. I don't even know what it is.
Spam is like part of America. It's
Wow.
it's Americana. It's America's meat.
It's something.
You know what Spam stands for?
No.
You know how they got the name? This is just a history random bull.
There you go.
Spam is spiced ham. That's what it stands for.
So it is ham.
Yeah. Well, yeah, right. Processed.
Oh yeah. It came in some sort of jar. I'd never seen anything else in. Some sort of
Yeah.
elliptical.
Military stuff. That's what Spam helped us win World War II.
Oh, okay.
It was the meat for the
See,
men
that's
in the field. Yeah.
something else I can
That's
throw
what I'm
into
saying.
my
You need
lesson
yes,
plans.
Not to eat Spam is not to be an American then.
Okay.
So now you're officially an American.
So when I do the World War II unit, I'll start with a Spam topic.
Serve Spam to the class.
Right.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, there you go. That's how we're starting the podcast off this week. So what we're going to do is we're going to, a few of you tweeted us some questions, and we're going to try to limit our responses, but we're going to get to these as we go, and hopefully come up with some very brilliant and insightful answers, or we will just ramble on like we normally do. The first question that we're going to tackle that you tweeted us was, is America really a land of opportunity? LOL. Anyhow, that is from Cameron Witt. Do you know Cameron Witt?
I do. Yep.
Okay, so these are, I'm sure, I guess all except for 2 are from students here
There's
at
one I don't
Lakeside.
recognize, so.
So, land of opportunity. Well, what does that mean? What is land of opportunity, first of all?
Well, do we? All right. So hang on. Do we want to take, or do you want to take a side and me take a side, or are we just going to ramble on and just say what's what? You want to do both sides of the issue to see?
Yeah, let's just see where it goes.
Let's start with okay. So
What's your opinion? Well,
what
first,
is land of opportunity?
Yeah.
All right. Land of opportunity to me is going to mean that people are going to have en masse now, not just a few people, but that people are going to have access to means to better themselves. Right? Everybody can determine for themselves what success means, and they can work hard through a process to achieve those goals. So that's the opportunity aspect. It's 2 things. It's the opportunity to succeed, but it's also the opportunity to be successful on your own terms. Like not everybody has to be the same, right? Not everybody has to be the same income level. Nobody has to live in the same house. I want to be. That's that pursuit of happiness thing in my idea. What makes me happy? Right. So again, it's to be the point where do we have avenues of success so that I can do that? Do I have the freedoms to make those choices? I think that's what it means.
Yeah, I mean, to me, I immediately think rags to riches. The opportunity to advance into some sort of pursuit of happiness, as Jefferson might put it. At least have the ability to do that, where you are not tied down by society. Now, the question is, in masses, in the United States today, in 2015, do people have this opportunity?
It depends. I've heard older Americans who will say, well, things just aren't what they used to be. And life's a lot harder now, and actually they kind of get this idea that there's this doomed momentum happening in the country, and I'm more optimistic than that. I mean, maybe it's because we've taught so much history and we've seen so many things happen, that the idea that this is some sort of terrible time, that doesn't really work in my mind. Life is always going to be challenging. I don't care which era that we live inside. It doesn't really matter to me. You look and you can see people struggling, and to not have any struggles, I think I think that's ridiculous to think that that's never going to happen. So for people to say, "Oh, it's changing," now it may be true that it's different than what they experienced, right? That's a true statement. Right. But to say that things are getting bad, oh, it's so terrible, I just don't buy that at all. So.
Isn't there always admiration for the good old days?
Yeah, and I've also heard people debating that out. Like, does we were talking about Andy Griffith a while ago, this theme song thing. The idea that Mayberry never existed, like people will sort of misremember, not necessarily purposefully, but they'll hearken back to a time when they thought life was better, and really, it's almost like, and I've read scientific journals on this where they said, it's a process of we tend to forget some of the more mundane or problematic parts of our lives, and we tend to, especially as we get older, sort of glorify this history of ours, and maybe even it's a way of rationalizing, perhaps. Like, it used to be better. Things are different. Things are definitely different. Technologies change and people's attitudes change, and it may not be what you've been accustomed to. That doesn't make it better or worse necessarily. It just means that you are uncomfortable. So when I hear people say there's no more opportunity in this country, like, that's not true. Even if there are challenges, cost of living goes up. Sometimes wages follow, sometimes they don't.
I think when the challenge is there are more challenges for certain groups of people, for certain demographics.
You think that more now than ever? Is that what you're saying?
No, not more. Well, no, of course not. Not more now than ever, but we still have that.
Right.
And you would think in 2015 we would have figured out, economy in general, the whole economic system, that they would have figured out a better way to where there's not certain groups of people that are born at such a disadvantage. And even today, in 2015, there are people that are born at such a great disadvantage as to other people who have things handed to them. Now, it's always been like that.
Right.
So that's not any different. However, we still have a large percent of the population that is born at a great disadvantage.
But don't you think, though, that in this country that we have more, that's what I was saying a while ago, more avenues for success for more people, depending on, some people are going to start ahead in the race. I get that. But at the same time, you don't have to wallow in poverty in this country.
Right.
You don't. We give, an educational opportunity to everyone in the country. And if you don't, let's say that you live in an area where, let's say maybe the schools are suppressed for some reason because they don't have the funding or the population's low and our tax base is low. You do have an opportunity to get out of that situation. You don't have to stay there, right? And you think, I don't know, I can't move, I don't have the money, I can't find a job. Well, you can, if it depends on how much effort do you want to put into that. So this idea that there are fewer opportunities for people, I really, and I know you're not arguing that, but I know that some people would say that, I'm stuck. Not really.
Well, it's going to take some people. It's just like people.
It may take more work for some people to get out of it.
I tell my kids at the first of school, I'm like, some of you, this is going to be a lot easier because you're auditory learners. All you got to sit back and listen. Mm-hmm. And then some of you are going to have to work and read and study, and it's going to be hard. But all of you have the opportunity to make an A in this class.
There are people who are disadvantaged in this system, but that does not mean they're stuck. That's the point I'm trying to make.
Right. And I agree with that. I definitely agree with that. And it's certainly better than a lot of countries that specifically suppress a certain group of people, and they have no avenue.
Now, with that being said, too, we have to consider how rapidly some things have increased in cost, which increases the number of people who may be disadvantaged. Mm-hmm. We've had, just since I graduated college the first time back in 92, the cost of attending a university and getting that education has gone through the roof. Hundreds of percent. I don't know the exact percent since then, but it's gone well up. Tuitions are really astronomical. And then they justify that by saying, well, we have better, we have more facilities and we accommodate more students and we have better living conditions and dorms and we're trying to build and grow and do whatever and more programs and more computer things. And I get that too. But at the same time, it's difficult for folks to try to keep up with that, especially when you think about wages not following. We haven't had a 500% increase in the mean cost of the mean income in this country. That hasn't happened. So there are things that are outpacing. You can talk about food, you can talk about gas, whatever.
When we have that free college movement now that's bigger than ever, really. I mean, a lot of people are talking about free public colleges. And what's funny is,
you think we could afford that?
No.
I don't either.
No, but it's, talking about it. At least it's brought up. It's weird is before communism got going and in Russia and socialism became such a bad word, a lot of people out there don't realize that public education is socialism.
Right.
And people don't ever really, they think, oh, well, that's good. Okay. I just, I'm going to throw that out there because I don't think a lot of people have ever thought that through.
What part of socialism do we hate then?
Right.
Do we hate the police and fire department? Do we hate the first responders? Do we hate the public libraries? Do we hate the fact that we have people building roads? Do we hate the public education system? All of those are socialist ideas and situations. So
it's easy and fun to say that we do not want the government, in our lives and all that. But it's another thing to what do you want to give up? Where do you draw the line and all that? So I don't know. It's a very interesting topic. I do still think we are the land of opportunity.
I do too.
And what's funny is people We'll talk. I've had kids go, man, I wish I lived back in the Old West. No, you don't. You ever?
Do you like dysentery? Do you like typhoid?
Right.
Do you like? What do you
What
love
else?
about?
What else is on your wish list? Some polio.
Right. I'll take a dose of that, please.
Yeah. So I'm like you. I don't have a pessimistic view of our current time period. I do think there are issues that we need to pay attention to. Just a tangent, and I have it on here, so this is not going off topic.
Okay.
As we had mentioned, population.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been thinking about this situation for a couple years, and I'm wondering why it's not a bigger issue. So for those of you who don't realize this, 100 years ago, there was roughly 1.6, nearly 2 billion people walking the earth. Now we're 7.3 billion and climbing.
Okay, so pace that out for them. So in a 100-year span, we went from just over 1.5 billion. Actually, we're pushing the upper levels, right? 1.5 billion. And in 100 years, we pushed up to nearly 7 billion. And say what you said before, because we were talking in the hall about this. About
I don't know.
Like how many people live now as opposed to...
Yeah, I had heard someone said, and of course hearing someone, I don't know how factual this is, but someone had said that there are more people walking around on the planet right now than ever lived before either 1800 or 1900. I'm not sure when. But in the course of human written history, all the way back to ancient Egypt, more people are walking around now than ever lived before.
Even if we don't have our statistics to be able to back that up, it's still an intriguing thought, and you can see how it could be.
Right.
Populations have trended lower, and we can go back and actually look that up if anybody's mad at us.
A
for
billion
not knowing the
people,
actual
though,
numbers.
a
We can go
billion
look.
people's a lot.
Yeah.
And just if you increase 1 billion, but we increased 5 point whatever, 5.
Right. So
6.
the point is, if we keep going at that rate, right?
Right.
How much longer can the Earth give us subsistence?
Now, and we have to kind of throw this in some Western cultures and some societies, family size has decreased,
Right.
which helps. Mm-hmm. But of course, the main push is the elderly, the people over 65. People are living so much longer, and that's a big percentage of our population.
In this country, is that a global phenomenon, though?
I think so, probably globally. I mean, I'm sure there are countries where it's not as true, but obviously with the new medicine, with the technology, we keep people alive. I mean, 100 years ago, if you got appendicitis, you're dead, or 200 years ago, whatever. Now you go get fixed and you keep on living.
Right. I can agree with you in industrial societies, but we have a lot of people who live outside that system, so they're still dangerous to them. But the population is definitely increasing and has been. And since we talked about that, I actually looked up some things with the actually from the United Nations and their sort of ideas on what might happen with population issues. Mm-hmm. And they're thinking that we can hit, I actually wrote it down, that by 2050 we actually are on track to hit 9 billion.
Ooh.
And then 10 billion by 2100. So we're going to add those to it. But then they think that there will be like this U-turn, apparently, because decreasing family sizes, because of that people will not want to or need to have as many children, perhaps, based on reduction of resources, or the fact that we're just living around longer, we don't need to replicate ourselves as often. Maybe that's the case too.
Right.
I don't know. So anyway, it's a thought. I don't know if that's really going to be a thing or
I thought you were about to say that somebody was going to develop some sort of final solution for
no,
people.
No, that's not what they said.
Mm-hmm.
But okay, so to that though, we could jump back to a guy who's from right around he's the latter part of the 18th century, a guy named Thomas Malthus.
Yeah.
Who discussed this, and he wrote essays in a book on it, Principles of Population. And in that, he discussed the idea that the Earth had finite resources, and not only that, but also that the people who are controlling those resources and distributing them will be less likely over time as the population tends to grow and burgeon, that those people will start hoarding resources
right.
and not sharing those out and not allocating them appropriately, and more people will be endangered. So his theory is that it'll kind of take care of itself, either naturally because people won't have the resources, or they'll be fighting for them and they'll sort of kill each other off in the process.
Yeah.
That nature will sort of only allow us to go so far. But this is where it gets weird with his theory, and interesting, I think, because other people will pick up on this later on. The social Darwinists will. And he'll say that if nature isn't taking care of that, like through famine, plague, and whatnot, that we actually need to do that ourselves through purposeful and strategic population reduction methods. And that could be warfare or, like you said, final solution kind of stuff. Other people will pick up on that notion and run wild with it later on.
Right. And for those of you listening, students, Malthus is a wall person, and he greatly influenced both evolution, biology, and economics and social economics. Anyhow, so yeah, people, quit having so many kids, and there you go. Maybe we should just make babies illegal for a while. Yeah, 5 years. That would take a big...
Well, the one-child policy, right?
There you go. I don't know. I don't know enough things, y'all. Let's move on to another question. So, land of opportunity, we knocked that out. Mm-hmm. Michael Cranton sent, why is America not the greatest country in the world? And I think he attached the clip. I've showed you this clip of Jeff Daniels, the actor that played in Dumb and Dumber, of all people, who's in another movie, which I have not seen, but I saw that clip.
Right, I saw it.
Talking about how basically horrific America has become.
I think we can tie that in with the other one.
Yeah, I do
the other question. So, are there massive problems? Yeah, I agree that we've got some problems. We've got some issues that we have to deal with. We've talked before about the political system, right? The way that we're not, it's dysfunctional at best.
It's not working.
It's hard to pass legislation. People are polarized. They don't want to work together. It's about criminalizing the other side. Anybody with a viewpoint different than you jump on them and say, "Oh, you're anti everything that I believe in, and I can't work together with you ever because we're this and you're that." And so yeah, that's a factor. But I don't know that I could sit there and argue that are we the greatest country in the world? If you start,
you have to define great.
If you start making comparisons, then we start thinking about what is it that people enjoy about being inside a country, and I would think that opportunities are part of that.
It's funny as people will look back. Well, we were the greatest. If you look back at the 50s and 60s, we were the greatest, maybe. But look at how our society was in the 50s and 60s. We were sexist. We were racist. Mm-hmm. We had so many inequalities.
It depends on who you ask, which goes back to that golden days mentality. That's very people trim that or edit it to make it be something that they really want it to be, and they ignore the negative things. Yeah, if you think, again, I go back to the Mayberry scenario. Oh, it was so great to have lived at that time when life was a lot more simple and people were kind and this and that. Well, really, it depends on where you lived in the 50s and 60s, whether or not you experienced kindness or you experienced, opportunities. And I think that we have a lot more of that today than we did then. So,
think about the 50s and 60s. In the late 50s and early 60s, that's when the Andy Griffith Show was shot.
Right.
I don't think about the late 50s and specifically the early 60s as this, Rosa Parks did her thing in 57. You got the civil rights movement going on. Hippies were starting to emerge. I mean, this was not Mayberry for a lot of big cities.
By 54, we're still, this is the baby steps into Vietnam, the conflict there. And then, by 64, we're in.
Yep.
Not Ted Offense, that's 68. But you have
Kennedy's assassination, 63.
Kennedy's happening. You also have the Gulf of Tonkin. That's what I was trying to get to.
Yep.
Gulf of Tonkin incident's going to take place, and so we're marching straight on into that scenario. So I don't know. Again, people just sort of see.
Once again, good old days. We kind of as we move on. Maybe we'll look back to this time period and go, "Man, it was great back then."
I sure wish it was like that. But what it means is, I wish I was like that. I wish I was that ideal.
Life was so simple.
Yeah, life was great when I was younger. Right. I think that's what a model that is. So, is America the greatest country? We've got issues.
Well, you have to break it down more than just. Economically, socially.
It's too simple. I agree. But I think that we are leaders in a lot of aspects. I think that there are people who are doing some things better than us. So it's too generic a term to go, we're the greatest. It's too simplified. Do we have good things? Yes. Do we have? Does the country itself have room to grow? Certainly. Do we have issues that need to be addressed? We sure do, and that'll continue to be a thing as people, as each generation kind of comes along and we redefine who it is that we think we are. Then I think that we'll continue to do that too, stretching out those opportunities for more and more people.
Right. Yeah, it's definitely hard to define what. I love America. I think it is a great country. I think we lead in a lot of areas. I know every time I leave America, I'm very, very happy to be back, mostly because I know the rules. I'm comfortable. I can understand people.
I'm sure you're this way too. I live here by choice.
Right, yeah.
Right? I was born here, and that's awesome. But at the same time, I stay here because I want to.
Right, yeah. I mean, we talk about, I think a poll came out, I don't know, a couple years ago. Norway had the highest standard of living. People will point to education, how we're so far behind in education. But a lot of that is, it depends on who they test.
It depends on how you look at the statistics, too.
Right.
I really am disappointed with politicians who will not step up to the plate and say, you know, when we compare ourselves to other countries, we're not giving a true comparison. We oftentimes compare our test scores, and even the testing itself is different. That's not mainstreamed across the world. They test differently than we do.
Right.
Just the way they're questioned and all that, and the way that they're trained to answer those questions.
Some countries have that academy system where they start separating you at ninth grade
Right.
to specialties.
And when we do comparisons, oftentimes we take our entire population
Yeah.
with all of its ins and outs and all of its and all of the abilities up and down throughout that system, and then you compare those scores with the top tier students across different nations' platforms, and that's not a fair comparison. You take our top tier students and you compare them to their top tier students, and I guarantee you that looks differently.
Yeah.
So the question is, why do we promote it that way? That the education system's failing. Do we have schools that need help? Yes. Do we have schools that are underfunded? Yes. Do we have teachers that need retraining or need to go and retire? Probably. I mean, you can.
Right.
I'm sure that's across the nation. But we also have some really spectacular things that are going on as well, and those don't get mentioned as often as they should, and that disappoints me. Why do people still come here for an education if our education is so terrible?
Right. And there's different time periods. Like if you look back at American history, there are times where we are doing such innovative, great things, and then that goes away. And then standard of living is really good for a while, and then that'll slump back down. I mean, things are cyclical to some degree. So when you say, is America the greatest country, or why isn't America the greatest country, you really have to break it down to what do you mean by great, and specifically, are you talking socially? I mean, I would rather live here than a lot of countries.
Right.
There's some social problems. You know, we talk about human rights in certain countries, and I mean, we're and it seems like we're progressing. It seems like, through the course we are learning some things and moving on. So
the arguments are ugly, but I still think that we're moving forward.
Right. I agree. Okay. Sophie, do you have Sophie in class?
I do.
Sophie Fleshner?
Fleischner?
Fleshner? Okay. She says, how do you feel about water on Mars?
I like it.
Yeah, I like water on Mars.
Will you drink Martian water?
So I heard Neil deGrasse Tyson talk about this. And so this is my little spiel because I heard him say it, and he's a lot smarter than me.
Okay, if you don't know who that guy is, you people need to look him up. He's one of the smartest men on the planet.
Right. He's a scientist that's trying to make astrophysics and cosmology cool to some degree, even though he's kind of a nerd.
Super physicist. This is the guy who speaks, and after about 10 minutes, I start feeling a little weird tapping behind my eye because his intelligence is kicking mine right around in my head, and I can't handle that. So he's brilliant.
So he was on a show the other day, and they asked him about that. And most people go, what's the big deal? Well, scientists have known for a long time that there used to be water on Mars. There's it looks like rivers that have been there and things like that. So we know that something has carved into Mars that looks like water. So they found water now, and people ask, well, what's the big deal? So he compared it to when Einstein came up with a theory about radiation, a certain type of radiation. Nobody cared. Who cares about this? Because it's not applicable.
Okay.
But then 30, 40 years later, lasers were developed. And, of course, barcodes, LASIK surgery. I mean, we use it for everything.
Right.
He also went on to talk about quantum physics. When it was first kind of being discovered and ironed out, nobody cared because they couldn't. But this is what caused the IT revolution that we are experiencing today with the internet and the technology that we have. So, water on Mars. Who cares? However, you never know what technology is generally exponential. One discovery can lead to 20. And, and with the population problem, we might need to live there one day.
We need some water. I think that on a when we jump that into a more existential, the idea that water, and recently the idea that there at times water actually flows on the surface. Not often because it's so cold, but at times it will actually move. Currently, that alone gives us more. If there's water, that gives a great chance that there is even microbial life on that planet. And if that's the case, and we do discover even something as simple as bacteria, doesn't that change a lot of people's cosmic perspective
Yeah.
and challenges a lot of belief systems, maybe even at that, which I think is very intriguing. The idea that we're so superior and we're alone on this in this vastness of the universe. I think that's I think it's cocky, number one, but I think to show people that look, life does exist outside this planet and can and probably does elsewhere. I think a lot of people will be intrigued by that. I think a lot of people will be threatened by that. So it will be, for me, it'll be fun if they finally do discover something like that. It'll be fun to watch people flip out a little bit.
Is that
and try to
scenario
come to terms with it?
Is that scenario not similar to the geocentric model that we believed in for a long, long time, and then Copernicus, Galileo come along? Now it's the Earth is not still, but it's rotating along with other planets around this bigger thing. So the Earth is not in the middle, and so it changed, and it took a while.
Well, we just did we did a primary source on Galileo and the church's attack on him specifically, and the indictment basically was, well, what you're saying is absurd. Everybody knows that is right. You can't prove that. It's not a thing. Everybody knows that the Earth is it, and you look around you can see the sun goes around us, and the Bible says so. And so to take that and to realize much later on that, hey, that guy was right. Well, a lot of people realized it sooner than the church did, obviously. But then to come back and say, it's true. And what's interesting about this whole water on Mars business is that recently, inside the church in particular, the idea that if we happen to find life on another planet, like the statement basically is this, like, don't flip out. It's part of God's plan. But I think that even with that sort of reassurance from an institution, that I think that a lot of people will still have massive problems adjusting to the idea that we're not the singular entity. Right. But I'll tell you something brilliant. And I've told my classes this too, that if we're it in the vastness of the universe, what a gigantic waste of space.
Right, yeah.
And that's something actually that my son said to me, and it was brilliant, and I loved that. So I pondered it. I'm like, you know what, that's true. If we're it, that's pretty lame.
Well, there's a British guy, another astrophysicist named Brian Cox, I believe is his name, and he's the guy who said there's probably somewhere around 20 million Earth-like planets in our galaxy. And so then you think, oh, well, obviously one of them will have complex life on it. And then the evolutionary biologists come along and say, yeah, but the chance to have complex life like we have here on Earth is about 1 in 20 million. So there is technically a chance that we could be the only.
I see. Yeah.
Now there's.
But does it have to be intelligent life to count and to creep people out?
What's that Brian Regan bit?
Yeah, right.
2 + 2 = chicken. There's nothing to see here.
Keep moving away.
I was also going to say just one more thing in addition to that. There is a lot of people who have thrown out the idea that we might not even be from Earth. Like life as we know it could have developed on another planet.
Oh, like we're the aliens?
Like a meteorite had hit the Earth way back when, carrying microbes, and that's where. I mean, that was I just discovered that like a couple weeks ago because I'm fascinated by this stuff.
All right, say that again because I'm still following you.
Somebody once said that maybe life was on Mars,
okay,
and maybe an asteroid, something hit Mars, and debris came to Earth from there, and it survived that journey.
Oh, this is interesting. Here goes Ancient Aliens, which we love. That guy. What if that because the atmosphere in Mars was, or on Mars, around Mars, that it was actually going away. It was dissipating, being siphoned off or funneled off or however it worked.
Yep.
The water systems are going. Maybe they had to travel here because we're the next closest thing. And so there's a cool kind of there's a twist to that I really like. The idea that we've got I can't think of the term that I'm trying to get. There's this nice. It's not irony that I'm trying to say, but it's something similar to that. The idea that it's poetic justice. That's where I'm trying to go with that. It's kind of poetic justice in my mind that we're sort of thinking about maybe going back if we did truly come from there to here, to go back to that as a place that saves us from the destruction on this planet.
Yeah.
There's just something kind of interesting about that.
Yeah, this definitely all ties into the population problem. Once
Right,
again,
right, yeah.
teach your kids about that when you have kids. Oh, wait, don't have kids because the population problem's too bad.
Slow down.
So yeah, that's interesting just to think about. This is two history teachers just making stuff up, by the way. We don't, I don't know what your science background is, but mine's not very good. But I'm fascinated by this stuff. And being history teachers, we know the history of Earth pretty well. We know what people have written down in books long ago. So it's kind of always fun to speculate before that or and stuff like that. So guess what? It's nearly 30 minutes.
Oh, goodness.
That went quick. So let's just do one more little topic. If we didn't read, let's see, Ray at Clout Ray gave us a question. My buddy Thelton gave us a question. We'll have to answer those next week, and we will get to your questions. Keep on tweeting us at History Hours PC. At History Hours PC is our Twitter. You can give us some questions. What do you want to talk about? Here's just something just random.
All right.
Today at school was Greece versus Greece Day, where people either dressed up like ancient Greece or they dressed up like they were in the movie Greece.
Right.
And I have never seen the movie Grease.
That surprises me. Well, but again, the movie came out, when were you born?
I can't say.
Can't say.
Somewhere in the 30s.
That's right, that's a thing. Okay, yeah. Somewhere, so the movie's been out, but you've just not seen it.
Right.
Does that bother you that you haven't seen it? Or what?
No, it's just, there's always, it seems like for a lot of people, there's always that one movie that everybody else has seen and you haven't. And I don't know why I haven't gotten around to seeing it. I just never did. And I don't know. Do you have a movie like that? Is there a movie that most people have seen and you just never saw it that you can think of?
Well, a lot of the movies that my students watch, like they'll say, "Hey, Mr. Franklin, have you seen this?" And I'll say, "Well, I haven't. No, not really. I haven't had time." So it depends on which, generationally, what are you talking about? So
there's people that hadn't seen Gone with the Wind.
Yeah,
these classic movies that everybody else has seen to some degree.
I try to, like, my wife and I have this thing where we actually go on old movie kicks, where we'll just go down and rent down, like, get a whole handful of movies that are even, like 20s and 30s and 40s.
The ridiculously sexist
super
movies.
Old movies. Yeah, some of them are outrageous compared to what we have the standards on today, because they're really openly biased against certain groups, and you're like, oh my God, I can't believe they actually did that. But that was part of the culture at the time. You have to understand that's...
Yes, I turned it on. I was flipping through channels, and it went to some sort of classic movie from like the 50s, 40s maybe. And a woman, they were in an argument, and he slapped her across the face. And I was just like, okay, lawsuit, you're in jail.
And she took it.
And she took it.
That's weird, right? There's no way that would work today.
No,
it shouldn't work
weird.
today. We want to make sure we clarify that too. We're not
advocating
them.
We are not advocating domestic violence.
But it's indicating that there's definitely a change in attitudes and
culture,
and what
good
people
grief.
do and what's accepted.
See, it's called progressing, people. Progressing.
I'll tell you something that it took me something I didn't see for a long time until after it was out was the original Alien movie.
Oh yeah,
yeah. I mean, I had known about
that's
it.
That's a good one.
I had seen, so I finally have seen it. I'll tell you one. Here's one that I haven't seen. Sticking with sort of a not really sci-fi but scary movie. The Exorcist. I've never seen The Exorcist. I've seen clips from it. I've seen parts of it, but I've never seen the whole thing. That's another good one. See,
you're thinking of movie. That's a good one. All right, people, we're about to wrap this thing up. If you have a question you'd like for us to answer or a topic you'd like for us to discuss, tweet us at History Hours PC. And we'll try to get to that. Right now, we are uploading these podcasts on YouTube. Eventually, hopefully, they will be available on iTunes. And hey, if you would like to be a part of the podcast, we might. You could submit your name. We'll throw them in a bowl, and we'll, and maybe pick somebody, maybe a student, to come in here and sit in on the action.
We'd love that. We'd love to get students involved and get their take on some things too, and we could bat that around. That'd be fun.
Yeah, because y'all know more about this stuff. I mean, it's fun to hear somebody that is currently 15, 16, 17-year-olds, how they view the world and technology. I mean, they grew up with smartphones. Isn't that incredible?
Right, yeah, this actually came up in class the other day when we were talking about, it was the 9/11 stuff, actually. We talked about that on our first podcast. A student said to me, what was the reaction like to 9/11 on social media? And it struck me, I was like, that's That's a great question because it's so part of their world, right? But I said social media didn't exist, and they looked at me like I was an idiot. Like,
yeah.
But it's but so that was a learning moment for them too, but also for myself because they expect that it's part of a cultural experience, that something massive like 9/11. There would have been this mass, this would have been, it would have been a Twitter bonanza, there would have been, everybody would have been talking about it. But so for them to realize that technology is newer than that event was really an eye-opening thing. And for me to realize that they didn't understand that wasn't a thing then, it was a neat moment for everybody to kind of, and again, it's about the technology where you go, wow, I didn't know that you didn't know. Right.
Yeah, as much as technology helps us and does so much for us, there's going to be studies to come out with cell phone addiction. People, how is that changing your life? Growing up with all this information, it's going to eventually have to change our educational system.
Well, I was talking the other day. I found an article on, I guess it was BBC, and it said they're discussing and studying an effect known as digital amnesia, where we don't have to. We're training ourselves not to have to remember many things because we can just look it up so easily.
Yeah, how many phone numbers do you know now?
That's what I'm saying. And when I read that, I'm like, that's exactly right, because like my daughter just changed her phone out and got a new phone number, and it's been a month and I haven't learned it. Because I have it programmed in my phone. I still remember her old one, but I don't know it.
Listen, if my phone died right now, I wouldn't be able to call my wife. I would. The only number I'd be able to call is my parents' house, because I remember that from when I was a kid.
Right.
And they have the same number.
We haven't programmed those things into memory because we haven't had to. That's the point that it's making. And not just, but going beyond phone numbers, everything. We don't go through a process of repetition that implants that in our long-term memory, and therefore, when we don't practice putting things in long-term memory, the article was stating that we may be diminishing our capabilities of storing things in long-term memory.
Wow. Idiocracy, the movie. Right. This is where we're going.
Yeah, there you go.
But by the way, students, this is why I do that wall. I make sure that you know that that's something we actually do, that's rote memorization, and I still think that's valuable. I think there's something to being at a dinner party in 10 years and being able to know who these wall people are.
Right.
All right, people, that is the podcast for this week. We might do another one next week, or just look out for it in a couple weeks.
Thank you to all the people who've submitted questions. We really do appreciate it, and keep on sending those in. We like that, and it gives us more to bat around, so keep that going.
That's right. And if we get enough followers, you can come sing a song. Maybe you can become a star on our podcast.
Sweet.
All right. Once again, thank you, and it's at History Hours PC. You can tweet us. Goodbye.